Can you tell us what is the main goal of your new book, Against Nature?
So the book began in a very simple observation, which is not original to me, which is, at least in the traditions that I am familiar with, and I should qualify this because it's an important qualification. I can't speak to traditions equally ancient, equally rich, in, let us say, China or Africa or India. But in the tradition that begins in Greco-Roman antiquity and continues with extraordinary continuity in many ways, even into the modern world in European and European derivative societies, nature is a kind of layer cake of concepts. And that should not surprise us. Almost any really interesting word has this layer cake structure, which makes it amenable to lots of uses in lots of different contexts. And in the book Against Nature, I tried to single out three ways of thinking about nature, by no means the only ones, even within this one tradition, which are extraordinarily enduring and influential. The first is specific natures. Specific natures are what makes a thing what it is as opposed to something else. So what makes a squirrel as opposed to a hummingbird, what makes water water as opposed to lead. And this category of nature is the original meaning of the Greek word physis. And in most traditions of the major European languages, still probably the core meaning of the word nature and its cognates in other languages. The order of specific natures is an order of taxonomies. It's a classification of the things that exist in the world and their properties, which are predictable, but not absolutely predictable properties. The second order is local nature, which is the distinctive configuration of topography, geology, flora, and fauna of a particular place. It is the familiarity of home and it is the exoticism of abroad. So it might be the frozen tundras of the north, it might be the mountains, it might be the seaside, it might be even an urban local nature. But within the patch of local nature, there's a certain relationship amongst all these components, not only amongst the flora and the fauna and the geology and topography, but also amongst the human beings who live there. And cultural customs are interwoven with the specificities of the local nature. This local nature, if it has a science, is probably ecology, which studies the web of interrelationships within a patch of the world which constitute a local nature. And the third is the order of universal natural laws. For example, the law of gravitation. These are regularities, orders, which we imagine, unlike local natures, which hold only within a certain area, which hold everywhere and always in the corner of my room or in the next galaxy. And these natural laws constitute an order which is at once permanent and without exception. It is inexorable. And its emblematic science is probably celestial mechanics. And what I argue in the book is that each of these understandings of nature has a disorder, an unnatural form which is associated with us. In the case of specific natures, it is monsters, reproduction gone awry. In the case of local natures, it's the natural disaster which capsizes the equilibrium of the elements combined in a local nature. And in the case of natural laws, it is either if you are theologically inclined, miracles, or if you are philosophically inclined, especially of a Kantian disposition, it is free will. And each of these forms of the unnatural has a specific passion associated with it that registers the disorder, the horror of monsters, the terror of natural disasters, and the wonder of miracles or free will.
Why is important the studies of history of science?
To begin with, that there are many motives for doing the history of science, as with any scholarly pursuit. But I think probably the main one for many of us is that we live in a society which is saturated with science and technology. Probably more than any other forces, it is science and technology that are driving change within our societies and have shaped the societies in which we live. And yet, the general public probably has a deeper understanding of the history of art than they have of the history of science and technology. So the first reason why I think historians of science write not only for each other, but for, we hope, a larger public, is that we want the public to understand how we got to where we are, and perhaps even more important, to give them some intellectual tools to make decisions which are, in democratic polities, still the decisions of citizens, about what kind of science and technology they want for the future. This is always a burning question, but perhaps now more than most epochs, because we are in the midst of a genuine media revolution comparable to the media revolution of the 16th and 17th century, when printing spread throughout Europe and then later the world. And the frameworks for the new media revolution are being hammered out as we speak. This is a decision that will have enormous ramifications, long-lasting consequences, and it should be a democratic decision because it will, perhaps more than any other single decision, affect how we live. The history of science is not the only resource for making such a decision, but it can help offer analogies, cases that are good to think with for citizens confronted with this decision. If we don't want to live in a technocracy in which experts make these decisions for us, for better or for ill, citizens have to be equipped with some understanding of science and technology, not only in the here and now, but in its very long-term development. So that's perhaps the major reason for the public justification of the history of science. But the history of science also is rich in intellectual surprises. And perhaps more than any other human endeavor, it is an endeavor which has enlisted the most diverse talents, the most unusual forms of ingenuity in the solution of the hardest problems. And that's the intrinsic worth and reward of studying the history of science.
Se você gostou, deixe o like, compartilhe e assine o canal. Para receber notificações de novos vídeos, clique no sininho.